thank you very much, Your Eminence, for coming and for your willingness to give an interview to the web portal Slovo Bogoslova. We will not ask you, how did you become Orthodox? You have already said about this in your different interviews. But could you tell us a few words about your parents, about your family?
Yes, my parents were both members of the Anglican Church, and my father was a soldier in the army. He served in the army for 30 years. He fought in both the First and the Second World War. I have one brother, two sisters. I have very good memories of my parents. I always remained close to them, and later on they came to live with me here in Oxford. And before she died, my mother joined the Orthodox Church.
These days, the books by Father Alexander Schmemann are quite well known in Russia among Orthodox people, especially when they became available after the fall, after the collapse of the Soviet Union. But especially the publication of his diaries has provoked deep interest to his personality. You know that you met him. How close were your relations with Father Alexander? What is your attitude to his works and to his legacy?
I greatly admire the work of Father Alexander. In particular, I was helped by his book For the Life of the World, also published as Sacraments and Orthodoxy. I met him several times. He struck me always as a person of high intelligence, certainly widely read in Orthodoxy, but also widely read in European literature. It's very clear from his diaries that he was a person of lively intellect and many contacts. So yes, he was one of the authors who certainly influenced me in becoming Orthodox. I might mention two other Russian Orthodox writers who drew me towards the Orthodox Church, Father George Florovsky and the lay theologian Vladimir Losky. Probably they had a greater influence on me than Father Alexander. And also I knew well Father John Meyendorff. I valued very much his work on St. Gregory Palamas. More recently, I've been inspired equally by the theology of Metropolitan John Zizioulas. So it's not only Russians, but also Greeks who have helped me on my Orthodox journey.
And who was the biggest, the greatest theologian of the 20th century, Orthodox theologian? Would you be able to name anyone?
Many people would say the greatest Orthodox theologian in the 20th century was Father Sergey Bulgakov. I never met him. I was only 10 years old when he died. But alongside Father Bulgakov, I would certainly put as very significant Orthodox theologians Vladimir Losky and Father George Florovsky, the two I've already mentioned. So perhaps rather than single out one Orthodox theologian, I will prefer to mention three.
the unity of the Church is one of her important characteristics. The Creed says about this, and indeed you wrote, perhaps also in your book, The Orthodox Church, we also remember the words of Christ about the unity among his disciples. It seems, however, that one of the features of Orthodoxy, at least since Constantine, has always been certain connection, association with the state. First it was the Byzantine Empire or Roman Empire, and later the different national states. The association between the state and the church has resulted in the existence of different patriarchates, and the number of jurisdictions is growing. How does it all relate to the idea of Christian unity we know from the Gospels? What would you comment on this?
Yes, in the past, Orthodoxy often worked with the idea of being a state church. That was true of the Church of Constantinople in the Byzantine Empire, and it's been true of many of the autocephalous churches. But in the 20th century, we have seen the link between church and state becoming much weaker in one country after another. So this leads us to ask, what holds the church together and makes it one? In the past, people might have answered, it is the governance by the state which holds the church together. Clearly, in the 21st century, we cannot give an answer like that. Let us go much deeper. What holds the church together is the Holy Eucharist, communion in the body and blood of Christ. That is the essential thing that the church does, and which nobody and nothing else can do. And I think it is the Divine Liturgy which is the foundation of unity within each Orthodox church and between the different Orthodox churches. So we don't look to the secular state to keep us together. It is the holy mysteries which hold us in unity.
And I think the approach of the Catholic Church is slightly different to this and of the Protestant churches. I think that the main principle of unity in those churches isn't Eucharist, is it?
Not to the same extent as among the Orthodox, but there have been Roman Catholic theologians who've stressed the importance of the Eucharist, and I think particularly of Henri de Lubac, who used to say, the Church makes the Eucharist, and the Eucharist makes the Church. But on the whole, in Roman Catholic teaching, especially at Vatican I, it is the jurisdiction of the Pope that holds the Church together, a juridical rather than a liturgical principle of unity. And among the Protestants, yes, they are so divided among themselves, so numerous in number, that on the whole they emphasize more the personal faith of the believer rather than the unity of the Church.
And considering such importance of the Eucharist and of course indeed of the Eucharistic communion, of course we can't not touch the current difficult events in the Orthodox Church and which cause divisions among the Orthodox at this particular moment. And what do you think about the situation which has developed in connection with the autocephaly of the church in Ukraine. And your opinion is especially valuable because you are one of the bishops of the Church of the Patriarch of Constantinople, the Ecumenical Patriarch, and you might have some like insider information, which what is going on, what you could share with us.
First, the situation in the Ukraine is extremely serious, and I am very distressed by the developments, and I don't myself see at this moment what the solution is going to be. Then, secondly, though I am a metropolitan of the Ecumenical Patriarchate, I am not at all happy about the position taken by Patriarch Bartholomew. With all due respect to my patriarch, I am bound to say that I agree with the view expressed by the Patriarchate of Moscow that Ukraine belongs to the Russian Church. After all, the Metropolitan of Kiev, by an agreement of 1676, was transferred from the Omophorion of the Ecumenical Patriarchate to that of the Patriarchate of Moscow. And so for 330 years, Ukraine has been part of the Russian Church. Now, that will not be a popular view in Constantinople, and I know His All Holiness, the Ecumenical Patriarch, has taken a different view. But certainly I feel that it was unwise of the Patriarch of Constantinople unilaterally to say the agreement of 1676 is cancelled. After all, as Aristotle says, even God cannot change the past. This is a fact of history, that Ukraine has belonged to the Russian Church. I believe, therefore, it has been a mistake for the Ecumenical Patriarch to give autocephaly to the two schismatic bishops, Filaret and Macari. The way forward, I think, must be to have probably a pan-Orthodox meeting of the primates of the Orthodox Church, not just Constantinople and Moscow, but the others as well, because this is a problem that concerns all the Orthodox churches. And the way forward, I think, must be through pan-Orthodox discussions. Perhaps we might even summon again the Holy and Great Council that met 2 years ago in Crete. At the same time, I am troubled by the actions of the Patriarch of Moscow, Patriarch Kirill, and the Russian Church. I am disturbed that they have broken off communion with Constantinople. I believe that this discussion of the position in Ukraine needs to be considered in a spirit of brotherly love without any breaking of communion. So in that way, I cannot agree entirely with either side. And I do pray that somehow there may be a reconciliation.
You have already said a lot, I think, and shared your opinion, but if just going further, what is your opinion your personal opinion, perhaps, why this question was activated, was sort of because of course the question of the Ukrainian autocephaly, the different understanding to whom the Ukrainian church belongs to, has been for a number of years, but at this particular moment, what is your vision?
I don't know. I don't have any inside information on this matter. I note, however, that in 2016, the Russian Church did not participate in the Holy and Great Council held in Crete. And the Ecumenical Patriarch Bartholomew had worked extremely hard to bring about this council. And it must have been a deep disappointment to him that in the end the Russian Church, even though it had taken an active part in all the preparations, decided that it could not attend. So that already is a difficulty that's arisen between Constantinople and Moscow. But beyond that, I don't know why Patriarch Bartholomew has chosen at this particular moment to intervene in Ukraine.
Disappointed with the break, but still you used to have close relations with the Russian Church and visited Russia almost every year for a number of years. What do you think, how serious is the break in communion between the Russian Orthodox Church and the Church of Constantinople? Has it affected your contacts with Russian Orthodoxy?
Here we should note that while the Russian Church has found it advisable to break communion with Constantinople, the Ecumenical Patriarchate of Constantinople has not broken communion with anybody. We continue to say that we wish to have full brotherly relations with all the different Orthodox churches, including the Patriarchate of Moscow. Therefore, from the side of Constantinople, I am still free to maintain all my many contacts with the Russian Church. And I can testify that my links with the Russian Church, both here in Western Europe and in Russia itself, have always been deeply important to me. When I first became Orthodox, I was received by a Greek bishop in London, but he then sent me for confession to my spiritual father, who was a Russian priest, Father Georgy Sheremetyev. And so from that time, I've always maintained many close relations with the Russian Church, and I've greatly appreciated my visits to Russia. Some of my happiest hours in my life have been spent before the holy icons in the Tretyakov Gallery in Moscow.
There is an opinion, maybe not shared by everybody, that in Russia the Orthodox Church as an institution perhaps was corrupted by the Soviet regime, and that is the reason why the bishops now support the policy of the Kremlin, of the state today. And many, especially in the Western media, and some opposition leaders in Russia say about the very close association between the church and the state in Russia now. And what would you say? Is that an opinion of many bishops in Constantinople?
I can't speak for other bishops in Constantinople, but I will speak for myself. it is important to distinguish between the position of the Church under communism and the position of the Church today. Under communism, the state was officially atheist and was committed to destroying the Church. And even though for a time they might tolerate the Church, their ultimate aim was always to abolish the Church. Today, of course, the regime in Russia is not anti-Christian or anti-Orthodox. Putin is not the same as Stalin. Putin is, so we are told, and have every reason to believe, a practicing member of the Orthodox Church. So the two situations of communism and today are very different, and we shouldn't confuse them. So far as the communist era goes, say from 1917 to 1988, we should note, first of all, the witness of the new martyrs and confessors of Russia. Before I became Orthodox, I read about the persecutions that had happened in the 1920s and 1930s, and the sufferings that very many of the Orthodox Christians underwent at that time. I was deeply moved by this, and indeed that was one of the reasons why I was drawn to the Orthodox Church. I saw the Orthodox Church as a church of martyrs. And I'm very glad that now the Moscow Patriarchate is able openly to glorify these confessors and martyrs in its worship. But the situation under communism was highly complex. I venerate the memory of Patriarch Tikhon, but I wonder whether Patriarch Sergius, he was not yet Patriarch at that time, was wise in the concessions that he made to the communist authorities in 1927 and subsequently. I feel that the Church in the communist era was unfortunately used by the atheist state, particularly abroad, in promoting the foreign policy of the Soviet power. So, yes, there are many things in the situation of the Church in Russia under communism about which I feel disquiet. But I have not lived under persecution as they lived, and therefore I have no right to pass judgment. What is important to note is that even if there were some bishops who were secret agents of the KGB, yet there were innumerable bishops, priests, and lay people who remained truly faithful to the Church, and we should not forget that. Even if there were some infiltration by the secret police in the Church, yet that did not prevent the Church of Russia under persecution from maintaining a lively spiritual experience. Yes, the present day situation, personally, I would be happier if there was not quite such a close link between the Russian Church and the state. But the true ideal that we are aiming at is that the Church should indeed have good relations with the state, but that it should always preserve its inner freedom. And I pray that this will be the case in Russia today and in years to come.
And coming back to the question of unity, of the church unity, the Lord said about unity while praying at the Lord's Supper, that they may all be one, as you, Father, are in me and I am in you, may they also be in us, so that the world may believe that you have sent me. The glory that you have given me, I have given them, so that they may be one, as we are one, is in the Gospel according to St. John. Is the unity of Christians possible today?
I recall some words of the late Patriarch of Constantinople, Athenagoras. He said, "Unity will be a miracle." But he then added, "a miracle in history." Unity will be a miracle that we cannot simply by our human efforts bring about the restoration of Christian unity. We need to ask the Holy Spirit to descend and draw us together. But the ecumenical patriarch Athenagoras was quite right to say unity will be a miracle in history. We do not simply hope that we shall all be one in the age to come. We are called to work for unity even now. Therefore, I support the efforts being made in the ecumenical movement. I think we have more to gain through bilateral dialogues than through membership of the World Council of Churches. But I support the participation also of the Orthodox Church in the World Council. I therefore definitely do not regard ecumenism as a heresy. We must, with all our heart, work for reconciliation. But at the same time, we believe that the Orthodox Church is the one true Church of Christ. And when we enter into discussions with other Christian communities, we must not compromise the Holy Orthodox faith. Without fanaticism, but with firmness and clarity in our compacts with other Christians, we must bear witness to the full truth of orthodoxy. Unity will not come about through compromise. So we have a precious treasure in the Orthodox faith. As is said by St. Paul, we have this treasure in earthen vessels. The glory and power are from God and not from us. So we are unworthy, we Orthodox of today, of this treasure. But let us hold fast to it. Let us be open and loving towards other Christians, but let us never deny our orthodoxy.
Contacts on the pan-Orthodox level can be perhaps overestimated. The most recent examples of the Orthodox, non-official Orthodox initiatives on the pan-Orthodox level, the IOTA, the International Orthodox Theological Associations, which is going to have their conference in January in Romania, and indeed our local, as it were, initiative, Orthodox Association of Theological Schools. Would such initiatives be undermining the authority of bishops in any way? What would you say on this?
It depends how these, we might call, para-ecclesiastical, unofficial groups work. It is important that they work in full cooperation with the bishops, that they should seek the blessing of the bishops. But at the same time, we ask of our bishops that they will trust us and give us freedom so that there can be an open discussion in these unofficial movements of all the problems which are confronting our orthodoxy today. So we desire to work with the bishops, but we ask them to trust us. Mentioning unofficial movements, we have here in Britain the Orthodox Fellowship of St. John the Baptist, which arranges conferences each year and produces a small journal, the Forerunner. But we have always, in our Fellowship of St. John the Baptist, sought the blessing of the different Orthodox bishops, which they have given to us. And in France and other countries in Western Europe, there are very active Orthodox fraternities, which, in my belief, contribute greatly to the local life of the different parishes. Also in Britain, we have the Fellowship of St. Alban and St. Sergius, which is not exclusively Orthodox. It is a movement involving Western Christians, particularly Anglicans, who wish to come closer to the Orthodox. But I think the Fellowship of St. Alban and St. Sergius has greatly helped the Orthodox themselves to come to a deeper understanding of their faith. So I welcome these unofficial groups, and we need such groups working alongside our parish structures and our organized dioceses. There need not be a conflict. They can enrich our Orthodox life, and I believe that that is what they are doing now.
Yes, thank you. But maybe just as a sort of like a bit of addition to our original plan, I have prepared just several actually short questions. Perhaps sometimes you wouldn't need to expand. It's sort of like a blitz rather. They are from probably. What is your favorite writer?
A favorite writer, yes. A writer who has influenced me very greatly is Charles Williams. He was English, he died in 1945, and among other things, he was the author of 7 remarkable novels, which we could even call supernatural thrillers. And among them, I remember particularly one book called All Hallows Eve and another called Descent into Hell. And these novels, which I read when I was still in my teens at school, I have always enjoyed and often gone back to them. Charles Williams is not so well known. He was a close friend of C.S. Lewis, who is much better known, and also of J.R.R. Tolkien. And along with Charles Williams' novels, I have enjoyed very much and regularly reread Tolkien's trilogy, the Lord of the Rings. So those are books of, you might say, Christian fantasy, which I enjoy, but also teach me many things.
How many languages do you speak?
Well, the languages that I know best are ones that I do not actually speak, and that is ancient Greek and Latin, because my first degree here in the university was in the classical languages. But in due course, I have learnt modern Greek, and also I am fairly fluent in French, so I can write in French and deliver sermons in French, though I do not have a very good accent. Other languages I don't know so well, but I do read some German and Italian, and I know a good deal of Church Slavonic. I'm able to celebrate the liturgy in Slavonic if required, but I ought to know modern Russian better than I do.
Whom would you name as the biggest Orthodox theologians of today? Any names?
Yes. In our earlier conversation, I mentioned mainly people who have passed on to the other world. But among those who are alive today, the one whom I honor most of all is Metropolitan John Zizioulas, Metropolitan of Pergamum, and I respect deeply his writings, both about the Church and about the human person. So I would put him in the first place.
Do you watch TV?
Not usually. I don't have television.
Do you listen to music?
Music, I do love music, especially the Baroque composers, and perhaps a little earlier too. I love Monteverdi, Vivaldi, and Bach. And I also love greatly the Russian church music. That is most beautiful.
What are you reading now? Do you have perhaps several books?
Well, I am reading several books, but just at the moment, in my moments of relaxation, I am reading a novel by John Buchan called John Barnet of Burn, John Barnet of Burns. I like the novels of Buchan very much. I like to read novels from an earlier era. I don't read so much modern novelists.
Do you have a dream which hasn't fulfilled yet?
Do I have a dream that has not been fulfilled as yet? I've had dreams that have been fulfilled. Very early on in my contacts with Orthodoxy, long before I had become Orthodox, I had a dream in which I was an Orthodox priest sensing the holy icons in the icon screen. And that was very vivid. And I took that as a sign that perhaps I was called to join the Orthodox Church. So that dream has come to pass.
Would you be able to share your favorite joke?
Oh, that is difficult. Jokes depend on a context. They need to arise spontaneously out of the conversation. I am told that there is a program on internet called The Bishop's Jokes, which consists of all kinds of jokes that I've used in my different talks. But it seems to be very strange when they are taken out of context and related simply on their own. So I find it difficult to single out a particular joke.
Anyway, thank you very much. What would you like to wish to the viewers and readers of the web portal Slovo Bogoslova?
We are meeting during the fast before Christmas. And so my message to the Russian Orthodox people is, may God bless you at the coming feast of the Nativity of Christ. One of the phrases which occur prominently in the vigil service before Christmas is, God is with us, s nami Bog. And I pray that you may feel the living presence of Christ in your daily life and especially at the coming feast. Christ, our God, chose to associate himself with the human race in the closest of possible ways by himself becoming a human being. And this is a source of constant joy and unfailing hope to all of us. So may you share in the joy of Christmas this year and every year.